the satisfaction of finishing your pedalboard for the 38th time.
Oh, hey everyone, it's Chris Kies. This week's rig rundown was with Donny Bene, a fantastic bass player out of Australia. He's one hell of a dude and a badass bass player. The thing about Donny is, he looks like he could serve you a fresh pizza or a gyro, whatever you're into, but what he's into is laying down funky beats, just like the 1970s. And boy, do I love the 1970s, but I was born in the 1980s. Anyways, you're gonna love this rig rundown because you're gonna love Donny B, full of DBE. Hey everyone, I'm Chris Kies. Today I'm at Basement East with the one and only Donny Bene. Donny, how you doing?
Not too bad, yourself?
I'm doing great. This is a special treat. If people aren't familiar, it's just a great honor to have you because you're a fantastic musician, but it's a weird, huge combination of influences in like your heritage, being an Italian-Australian. Mm-hmm. But it's like, can you debrief everyone that might think that this is a shtick or a joke, but like, can you kind of what the Donny Bene is all about?
Oh, thank you for the kind words.
You're a fantastic player. I mean, obviously the intro just spoke for itself.
Oh, I hope so. I mean, you know, I'm not great at that stuff. I mean, I'm a very seriously trained musician. I've been a jazz musician in a prior life, and I try not to take myself too seriously now, but I'm deadly serious about taking the piss out of myself, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's I had
but the music is so good. It's not.
It has to be. Yeah. It has to be. I mean, for me, like I'm a massive nerd, as you can tell.
Yeah.
Gear and music and influences and all that kind of stuff. So I always take the approach of like, would I like to listen to this stuff? Like if some bald, chubby guy started shredding on bass and fretless, I'd be like, hell yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, I may as well be that guy to do it. So, yeah.
It's an amazing thing because, again, you know, everyone thinks of it as a shtick because there's a lot of great, I don't say caricatures, but there's acts like Steel Panther, you know, like those types of bands, and that's fun too. But what I think is real genuine about what you is it's a love for the music and a love for the instrument and bass.
Yep.
But like you said, you're classically trained in double bass, and you had to go at that trying to make that a career.
I did it, and I was sick of it, and I moved on to it's funny. I kind of grew up, taught myself, like I was a classical pianist for 10 years or something, and then come from a musical family. The drummer and the saxophonist in my band were all brothers, so we all taught ourselves instruments. I taught myself bass. My dad bought me a bass, and it sat in the hallway with a price tag of $440, and every time I walked past it, I got guilty. So he had some like instructional books, and I ripped them out and learnt them, and then I got he had a video that had like Larry Graham and Bootsy Collins and Bernard Edwards and Nile Rodgers on it. So that was my.
I can clearly influence. That's very heavily influenced.
And it's funny because then I went off and studied, you know, did a masters of double bass jazz, all that kind of shit, and played with all these great Australian jazz musicians. And I ended up coming back to the music I wanted to play as a teenager. So it's kind of rad. Like it's a really nice circle.
Now, in between that circle and the sandwich, we'll call it, of that what makes up your musical history is Triosk. It's like a very experimental jazz trio that you had. How does that kind of inform where you get now? Because that was such an experimental thing with loops and obviously with what we were doing there with your brother.
That was a big thing. So that was with two other musicians, a drummer called Lawrence Pike and a pianist called Adrian Clumpers and Clumpers. And we were working with mini discs back then. It was like I used to dangle a little mini disc mic over my Roland Cube and make samples. I had I think a Boss DD3 or whatever, the one that had like 1.5 seconds of delay.
Yeah.
And we'd literally make loops out of that. And but that band was was complete and utter freedom in it, and I really learned the importance of the bass in that, because the drummer and the pianist were very like explosive, dynamic, and my job was just doing big, deep notes, but I'd learnt the power of shifting a note could influence where the composition went or the improvisation went, where the rhythms went. So it was a really good thing, and I already knew how important the bass was from growing up listening to Motown and funk and soul, but then less, it was really about less is more. So, you know, amongst all the chaos, I just do a big note, and that would kind of influence where we go, that was kind of what spawned the Donny Bene project, actually, because the band broke up.
Okay.
And I continued making, I'd gotten like Cubase and a Line 6 delay pedal, so I had 14 seconds. And I was just kept on writing this music. I was like, yeah, maybe I'll put out like a solo electric bass loops album or something. And the drummer of the band was going overseas doing had signed to this big label, and they were doing like 8 months of touring. So I started making these Donny Bene songs as a little joke, and like singing into the mic here, and they just kept on encouraging me, like, oh, do another one. And then eventually I had 8 songs, and then I had a record. And it's funny because the record, it's a true jazz kind of dog thing, that my first record, everything is one take. Because I'd always worked in that jazz realm of you own your mistakes, and it's one chance and that's it. Yeah. And for some bizarre reason, I applied that to an indie pop record. So it's a really weird record. Like I play in all the drum patterns on the machine, but that came about from Triosk ending. So it was a beautiful accident, I call it.
Well, speaking of beautiful accidents, this is how this all came about. Is that you emailed us months and months ago, probably when you were still pre-planning your trip over here for the U.S. tour.
Yep.
And that's how I got introduced to your music. I went back through the catalog, and now thinking about like how that was spawned from the Triosk more experimental thing, and then how you were just trying to figure it out as you're going and get encouraged by friends and family, is that I could see even just in like what your presentation is and how the album covers look, that you're finding who Donny is as you've gone through this.
It's definitely evolving, yeah, and I'm skilling up. I've got better gear as I went along, but then I also, like with this record and the last one, I kind of took a step back and like, well, I don't have to use all the gear at once. The newest record, sorry, I'm playing drums on it, and a Yamaha CP70, and they take up so much room in the mix that I really barely play. Like the bass lines are simpler, the synth, there's not as many synths, the guitar's really simple, like every part counted a lot more than it did in the past. Yeah. So it's a nice personal journey for me to refine it. And there's that thing, as you get older as a musician, you kind of lose your chops, which you don't lose them, you become smarter. Yeah. At placing notes, and so yeah.
And I know that starting out, all the instruments were done by you. Is that still the case on all the albums?
Except for the saxophone, but yeah.
Okay,
so,
yeah.
You
can't handle the sexy sax?
No, my brother's too, he's the best, so I just leave that to him.
Yeah.
But, it's kind of fun, like it's part of the appeal, and then it's really weird because when I speak to my brother about the drums, like tuning drums, I'm like, I tune drums like how they sound on the record, which is, because he'll come over and tune my drums, and I'm like, this sounds weird to me. Yeah. It doesn't sound like Steve Gadd. So then I'll like tape it up and I'll play it. It's like, yeah, this sounds like, on this record. And so it's kind of weird. So I think that's what makes it work, because in my head I've got how I want it to sound. Yeah. I mean, it would be great to work with other people and do that. But for the moment, it's kind of how it goes and how it rolls.
Yeah, and so as we get now, we'll actually get into the equipment you brought over to the States for your tour here. You have a YouTube channel that showcases a lot of cool instruments. Yep. You have like a hollow body Maton. Yep. And then you have like a fretless Stingray and some other cool, obviously P basses and stuff. So like, check out his YouTube channel for that. Yep. For great material, not only, and there's some instructional stuff. Yeah. It's great. It's great, Donny. What you do is fantastic. And but let's talk about what you brought over to the States, and what's this?
This is a F-Bass VF4. I don't know how I found them. That's all over the internet. What's his name? Scott's bass guy. And then I think it's really weird. I'm a really big fan of Steve Swallow, this jazz bass player. And he had this bass, I could never pick what it was. And I always thought it was Federa because of the F, but it was a Furlanetto.
Oh, okay.
So I dropped by in between Toronto and Chicago, and somebody had an appointment set up. They were going through like all these basses, and I was like, hey, do you mind if I play? And the guy's like, yeah, sure. And I was just shredding away, and the guy's like, you're pretty good at bass. I was like, oh yeah, and I said, just did a gig in Toronto, and apparently when I left, the Panther was a big fan. He's like, man, why didn't anyone tell me Donny was here? So I spoke to them. They're like, hey, you know, I was like, oh, I'm pretty interested in ordering one. So they hooked me up with an artist deal, and I spoke to Marcel, who's Furlanetto, and we spec'd out this bass, which is, I kind of wanted to have like an 80s high-end, you know, custom bass. So like the two-tone, gold hardware. I have D-tuners on everything.
Okay.
It's even got Don embossed in the back there, which is pretty cool. I got the fancy 5-piece neck with the stringers, ebony board. This thing is like it's probably the best live instrument I've got. So I've got
Really?
Well, because it's so like.
Imagine because it's taking the place of all those other instruments.
Well, it's just
versatile.
It's funny. Like for recording, it's cool. Like these pickups are like super clean. The preamp on this thing is amazing. For recording, I like a little bit of dirt. So like if I've got a P bass, I've got like a 66 P I'll use.
Okay.
If I've got my Stingray, I've got an 82 Stingray. And jazz, I've got a really nice 77 jazz with the Marcino pickups in. That's the one I did the demo on. And so they're all cool, and they all like do very specific things. And it's funny, like I don't get in shit from my wife for buying new basses because she's a musician. I'm like, these are all different tools. You know, like, you know, a carpenter has 8 different saws that do. And she's like, yeah, I get it. So they all do different things. But live, like a Stingray is cool, but you can't. I do a lot of pick muting. It sounds like shit. If you want to do some slap, the Stingray's got that very particular sound, which is cool. It's a little thin for me. If you want to do the Bernard Edwards thing, of course, it's perfect. But then this thing can do kind of all of it, like obviously having the PJ set up. I predominantly use it as a P bass this time around. Okay. But it just cuts through, and like if I'm playing and I'm not quite happy with the monitor mix, I can just change this. It's a really transparent preamp on it. So
can you show us a little, kind of maybe the key sounds that you get from the bass? I mean, I'm just using different controls.
Yeah, so like, I mean, this is passive. It's going to be, and then I mean, not my favorite sound, the PJ.
Yeah.
But then you can also, I'm learning how to roll them off, and then once you start putting a bit of color in, so I kind of crank everything. If I guess I want to get a bit of a that's kind of my Stingray version. And then a nice dirty my P bass, and it slaps. It's super, like I think with the ebony board as well. It's super, like every note is even. So live it's just, and it's perfect. And all the sound engineers in Europe were like, this bass is great. Like played out front, they're like, it's just so clear, so crystal, like so easy to mix. Yeah. So I mean, these guys, they know they make a good bass. Yeah. And you know, like I'm going to go and order a jazz bass to match this. So I was going to get a fretless and neck. So we're going to match the neck pockets. So I might make this into a fretless, then I might make the jazz the touring bass then. Because I kind of miss the jazz bass. P basses are great, but so yeah. But this is what I've brought. It's kind of the one that does everything.
What strings are you running?
These are D'Addario NYXLs.
And the D'Addario NYXL.
But they're D'Addario strings, and I've been using those since forever, and I love them.
D'Addario strings as well.
D'Addarios.
Right. D'Addario. I've been using D'Addario.
I'm a fan of D'Addarios.
Started using these D'Addarios. I like the D'Addario NYXLs.
These are D'Addario, and I got the NYXLs on here.
I noticed through your catalog of instruments that you do use, you don't try to make an instrument do something that it's, I don't want to say intended to do, because that's all we're trying to do as musicians with different colors we have. We try to get what we can. But I noticed that you find the strengths of that instrument and then you go with it rather than trying to, you know, square peg into a round hole.
Yeah, no, it's no point forcing. Yeah, it's no point getting something to sound like it, but it's not. And that's why it's like the beauty of having that array of instruments at home to record. But touring, you got to kind of make a big choice. And you know, I was, to be honest, I was like, I got this, and I was like, oh, I've got to go do a whole series of touring. I'm like, I was going through basses each week. I was like, okay, I'm taking this bass, and I'm like, oh, I'm taking this one. And I was speaking to everyone, like, oh, maybe I'm not going to bring the F bass, and you know. But in the end, it kind of won. So, I mean, I had a great, our guitarist has an Australian instrument called a Grabisa, and I had a great jazz bass I got off him, but it's got clay dots. So went to rehearsal and I couldn't see anything. I was like, okay, that one's out of contention. But yeah, I'm just lucky to have a really nice, group of basses, everything like synths as well, but basses especially. So
what should we know about strings that you're using?
So I use only the best Labella. So
there you
I've got
go.
Labella stainless on this. They do make the super polished, which are like the limited, and they're hooking me up with some more. I put those on my Stingrays because they're like in between a flat and a round wound.
Okay.
Because a round wound on a Stingray for me is a bit like Flea 1990s, which is cool.
Yeah.
It's not what I'm after. And then Bernard did the flat wound, which is cool, but then I just don't find live the flats cut through. Like for a studio setting, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Whereas these polished stainless are like,
there's a sound to them.
yeah, they've got that. They're not super ringy, but then they're articulate and got a bit of snap to them. So
Yeah.
But yeah, I've just got the Labella stainless. I had the nickel, but I think I've settled on the stainless now, and yeah, they're my guys. I've got the flats for my P basses if I want to sound like a, nice and dirty. But yeah, so that's pretty simple.
Okay. Well, I see. Well, I'm standing in front of the amp.
Yes.
Where you got the Bergantino?
Yeah, this is my first time with the Bergantino.
Okay.
I was using another amp, an Aguilar, and I couldn't get set up with one over here.
Okay.
And my good friend Mark Stranger Najar is Mr. Bergantino. He's hooked me up with this thing, and I'm blown away by it. It's
I didn't know if
amazing.
it was something bound by blood. You had to do like Labella for the Italian
Oh,
descent,
yeah.
heritage,
Well,
and the Bergantino. I didn't know if it was like that was a
It's a thing of
requirement.
like, modern amps are in, like, I haven't bought amps for ages. Like I came up with like GK 800 RBs,
Yeah.
PV Mark IVs, like big rigs like that, and like these little guys are just, I don't know, is it a D class, whatever it is?
Class D, yeah, power.
Yeah. But this thing is like amazing, and they weigh nothing, and like,
Yeah.
And it's funny, like the more touring I'm doing, the smaller I'm noticing everyone's rig's getting. So like, even when Mark was hooking me up, he's like, "I'll get you a quad box." I'm like, man, I just even need 112. Like,
Yeah.
Because I do everything. Because I sing, I need to have the bass through the wedges cranked up. So I'm getting all my bass from there. If we're doing a smaller venue, and the wedges aren't so hot, I'll need to rely on an amp. But just coming back from Europe, a few festivals, there's people with like Aguilar 2 110 boxes. And like that high.
Yeah.
Like that's what everyone's doing now. So,
Why do you go with? What do you prefer about the 12-inch speaker versus like a 10 or a 15?
I like 2 12s are cool. Like 15s I like, but they don't speak quickly enough sometimes. 4 10s I usually bottom out if I'm doing my picking stuff.
Yeah.
So something like a 212 is like, I think that's the magic spot for me. But again, at home everything just goes through my interface in NS10s. So I've got all these, I've got these incredible basses that are going through like the shittiest studio monitor you could think of.
Well, and then what do you got here for key? Because obviously that's a big component of
this-
your sound, so you have to have something
This
to
is cool,
represent the
the-
synth.
Korg monologue, like basically I want to travel, when I do a solo show, I want to be able to travel with everything on carry-on.
Yeah.
Because I did a show, my first ever tour I went to Paris, and I was carrying a Moog little fatty with me. It was so stupid. And I got screwed over, they wouldn't release my bag, so I had to I had a little USB keyboard. And luckily I could run that off GarageBand. So after that I was like, whatever I get, it has to be small. And I had like a micro Korg, and the keys are too small. And these things came out, and like every tour I finish, I'm like, I put a post up like, these are so rad. They're like $200, and they're analog, and they sound fine. And, I mean, I just use it as a lead synth,
Okay.
just to shred on. So
Can we hear a little bit of shredding?
Oh, no, we were turned off.
Okay.
But it sounds good. It looks good. it fits in a carry-on. So.
And it obviously is not too precious to not have duct tape on it.
No, that's.
I see on the underside there's duct tape.
Yeah. If I start doing this or the subs, it's fallen off a few times. So our power supply just broke tonight, so it takes 6 AA batteries, which is amazing.
That is great.
But yeah, it's just, I mean, I'm not super fussy. Like I just want to make the tour rig as simple as possible.
Yeah.
Like my pedals, obviously.
Yeah, which is funny because, like, alluding to the Korg taking the place of so much stuff that you use probably in the studio, I mentioned off camera that the Prophet 6 is part of your sound. So is there anything else that you can mention off the top of your head that you use that people might be familiar with?
Oh yeah,
listen to your stuff on Spotify?
I was really lucky during the GFC. The Australian government gave every citizen $700, and everyone else's economy in the world tanked except for ours.
Yeah.
And so then our dollar, which is usually just what do we call it? The Pacific peso, was at parity with the US dollar. So I bought off Perfect Circuit Audio when they were still like a small kind of shop. I bought like an Oberheim OB8, Prophet 6. After what else did I get from them? Maybe that's it. And then Prince came to Sydney, and I was like, I have to source an LM1 because I already had a Lindrum that I bought from Japan. I joined the Yahoo Group's Lindrum LM1 owners forum, and I was like, just put a post, and within like an hour, 3 people were like, yeah, I'll sell you mine. Like, but then when it came like, here's my money, they're like, oh, actually, I won't. So the guy I bought mine off, I sent him all my music and my clips. I'm like, look, I'm going to use it every day. And I think this guy owned it and like, you know, pour himself a glass of scotch once a month and play like, you know, all the Prince. Play all the, because I had all the Prince patches in there.
Yeah.
That Bruce Forté would have put in. So it's, you know, he's like, okay, there's a few other people that want it, you can get it. And I think I got it for like 4,000 Australian, and now they're like 50,000 Australian on Reverb or something. So
that reminds me of like when I tried to buy a house here in Nashville, and me and my wife would write down like a letter like, hey, we're looking to start a family, trying to like tug at the heartstrings, and you're like, hey man, I'm going to use it. Like, it's not going to sit and collect dust. Don't worry, I'm going to play it.
That's how I get gear. When there's like those stubborn old guys that like, they're like, oh no, you know, it's a collector's item. I'm like, hey man, instruments are meant to be played. So I usually move on stuff that I don't play. Like if 2 years go by and I haven't played, I'm like, all right, it's time for it to go. So I've let go of some really nice. There's a few I've regretted, but they've gone to good homes and they need to be played. Like all my axes are always sitting out on the stand, and I'm always picking them up and playing them. So if something's sitting there and not getting used, it's, you know, it needs to go to someone who's going to appreciate it. So, but that's my little secret trick of like, hey man, you know, I'll treat it with respect. You know, it'll be on all my records, like, and it works 9 out of 10 times.
So there you go. There's you guys. There's a tip from Donny B. Now let's move on to your pedal board. What do you got at your feet here?
I've got my Boss TU3 that says Don's Tuner.
Yeah.
Because I've got to stay in tune. I can't find a good chorus. I've got a Boss. I had a Boss bass chorus, which kind of sucked. Then I had an old C3, I think, which was. It's just hard to find a good bass chorus because it gets so thin. I've got a Dimension C, which it's kind of working at the moment. I think I bought this for my keyboard player. I mean, I only use it for like just like little melodic lines.
So very specific parts without.
Yeah, like I need to find if anyone can help me out with a good bass chorus.
Yeah.
I need something that has body because like you just lose it so much. But and then the OC2. I used to have the DODs, which were my favorite.
Yeah.
But my childhood one died. I got another one. It was faulty. This is cool, and I just use this for a lot of doubling. So. So just a little color, and there's a nice.
It'd be hard to take that off. That's because it's not overbearing. It's.
No, I mean, it's for another song. I've only got 1 octave going because you got to. I'm careful not to fight it out too much.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot more noticeable.
Yeah, so that's you can get away with it if you back it off a bit, but yeah, that's kind of. Don't really use. I mean, it's without sounding like a wanker. Like the tone is all in here, so I'm really into. Ooh.
Surprised you don't like a compressor pedal.
I hate compression.
Really?
Yeah, if I have my wedge, I'm like, oh man, because I like all the subtlety. Like my pick's gone, but I do lots of. So I'll get and varying degrees of, you know, where you put the pick.
Yeah.
Like the Steve Swallow thing. And then, you know, and then of course, so there's like, you know, I mean, it's not rocket science, but 3 different sounds, 3 different positions. That's kind of enough for me. Like, I think putting anything else in there, I even find it like distracting enough, like doing that.
And you're singing.
That is all, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's a task in itself.
Singing and tour managing and thinking about that while I'm singing. It's too much. But no, but it's yeah. I just try and keep everything as simple as possible, and you know, like enjoy playing and like the singing and bass playing parts.
Yeah.
Kind of crazy enough in itself, but yeah. I mean, I wish I didn't have to sing, but I'm the person.
Yeah, you kind of fell into the singing based on kind of like how that experiment started, right?
Yeah, you know, and I'm not a great singer, but I'm a good bass player, so that makes up for it.
Speaking of bass playing, I wanted, before we get out of here, Donny, is what is when it comes, I'm sure maybe your set list changes, but on a night-to-night basis, what's like a favorite bass line or song that you really get enjoyed to play as that bass player?
Yeah. I used to like playing. We're not doing it this tour. "Girl of My Dreams." That's just a really simple. Just a really. Like getting, when you're asking about the compression before, it's like getting it to sound like a recording.
Yeah.
And so like something simple like that, that's the difficulty. Whereas playing a more
something busy.
Oops. That's easier to do that. That kind of just, there's so much going on, it plays itself.
Yeah.
So when you're really exposed, it's like I think there's that one, Second Dinner I like playing there.
I just find all your playing fascinating. So it's like that. So I'm just always curious as the guy that creates these bass lines and music.
It's funny. I was thinking today because I taught myself electric bass and then I went to a double bass background. I play electric bass like a double bass player, which is using like two fingers.
Yeah.
Like even up here, I'm like all my lines are like that. So it's like but no, you know, you work with what you got. But yeah, I mean, it's not. It was funny, like getting me to play something before. I'm like, I'm not one of those Instagram guys.
Yeah.
Like in my head, doing even those bass videos I do, I'm like, oh yeah, this is easy. I'm a good bass player. It's really hard to do. Like I don't know how those guys do it.
What do you think is so difficult about it? Because someone that's clearly you're proficient on the instrument.
I think it's like, I mean, I'm happy. I'm easy with recording. Like once the tape rolls, you know, you're there.
Yeah.
But I think it's the camera thing as well. Like, because watching someone like.
I mean, you're camera ready, man.
Well, I don't know. I do what I can.
No, but like you come off very well, and of course, it's the playing speaks for itself, and the music does too.
Oh, cool.
It's so fun, and like, I tried my part to dress what I could find in my wardrobe that would bring out like my personal DBE, Donny Bene, you know.
Donny Bene experience,
yeah. Because you're Mr. Experience, but it's like I know it's a shtick or whatever, but your music's so fun, and I tell these guys like if I had a house party going, I would throw your music on, and I know everyone would enjoy it because it's great, it's fantastic, man, and I really appreciate the positivity you put out in the world, and it comes through in spades with this bass and your bass playing.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for talking to us, Donny.
My pleasure.
And check out Donny, the Italian-Australian.
When you realize your band sounds like something you'd actually listen to.